Excellence,
Excellency Mr. Mohammed Sheikh Al Ghazwani, President of the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, current Chairman of the African Union, Excellency Honorable Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Republic of Ethiopia, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government and Heads of Delegation, Excellency Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine, my friend, dear sister, that is the Prime Minister of Barbados, Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Honorable Ministers, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, former Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Madam Deputy Chairperson, Commissioners, Secretaries General, Executive Secretaries of the Regional Economic Communities and Regional Mechanisms, Chief Executives of the Specialized Institutions of the African Union, Heads of Diplomatic Mission, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with both a great honor and a great pleasure that I'm addressing myself to you for the last time in my capacity as the chairperson of the African Union Commission. Since we are at the beginning of 2025, I want to present to you, Excellencies, to your families and your peoples on behalf of the African Union, my best wishes for health, prosperity, and success. I would like also to express my sincere gratitude to the chairman with whom I have worked successively over the past 8 years. I'm here referring in the order of their chairmanship: Alpha Conde, Paul Kagame, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Cyril Ramaphosa, Antoine Felix Tshisekedi, Macky Sall, Azali Assoumani, and Mohammed Ould Sheikh Al Ghazwani. At this moment of remembrance, I cannot forget President Idriss Déby Itno. May his soul rest in peace, who, as a convinced Pan-Africanist, had the initiative presenting my candidature to head the Commission, and who invested himself unstintingly for such a destiny for me. His tragic death was my most atrocious pain of these 2 terms. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 8 years have elapsed since my election at the end of January 2017 as chairperson of the African Union Commission. At this moment, loaded with history, meanings, and symbols, I would like to fulfill the moral duty of presenting to you the broad outlines of the outcome of these 2 terms. Thanks to this journey, I have deeply imbued myself with both what makes the greatness and the influence of our continent, of our continental organization, as well as the various constraints and limitations that have hindered the rhythm of our pace. I have crisscrossed this beautiful and fantastic continent. I feel deeply proud, having visited at least once all the 55 member states of our union. The opportunity that this moment affords is historical and unique. I will try to fulfill the dual obligation of reporting and also raising some questions about some issues, being well aware that we must not absolutely abuse of your precious time. A consolidated report of our achievements and an annual report have been distributed to you in accordance with our regulations. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the rapid and intense geopolitical upheavals that have characterized the international context during my 2 terms of office have both violent and destabilizing manifestations. The sudden deterioration of the health situation following the outbreak of COVID-19 was unfortunately accompanied by major shocks and profound economic and diplomatic turbulence For Africa, this resulted in an increase in the debt burden, a decline in public and private investment flows, violence and the prevalence of some African conflicts, the collapse of Pan-Africanism and the chains of African solidarity, manifestations of the obsolescence of African institutions, external appetites in Africa, obvious deficiencies in governance and leadership in Africa and even in the world, and the crisis of multilateralism after the Second World War, and so on, and so on. The Russia-Ukraine war, which began in February 2022, further darkened this picture, announcing a global geopolitical reconfiguration. A split emerged that resurrected a form of bipolarity, which in political imaginations brings to mind the theoretically outdated reality of the Cold War. Deep uncertainties about the sustainability of peace and international cooperation have poisoned the minds, darkened the conscience, and reinforced the pessimism, selfishness, and mercantile pragmatism. The consequences of this war deeply affected Africa, which imported most of its cereal consumption and agricultural inputs from these two countries, that is Russia and Ukraine. The specter of food and health insecurity hung over many of our countries, many of which continue to suffer from their structural fragilities. Excellency, Mr. Chairman, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, in the Middle East, the brotherly people of Palestine suffered and continues to suffer one of the worst injustices in the history of mankind, the horrible and unjust war which completely destroyed everything in Gaza and Palestine, particularly in Gaza, to deprive this people of its fundamental rights to independence, peace, existence, and to life, in an indescribable shame for the whole of mankind. In spite of all this, these valiant Palestinian people remained stoic, and the African Union remained firmly by the side of the Palestinian people. I want to express to our brother, Abu Mazin Mahmoud Ramadan, our solidarity. This apocalyptic landscape that Palestine, the Gaza Strip, and its population, in particularly after more than a year of war, destroying all forms of life and property, continues to unfold in almost total silence of the powers of the world, except for the call by some for the systematic deportation of Palestinians from their lands. It is really adding insult to injury. This unprecedented tragedy weighs heavily despite the ceasefire and the release of hostages and prisoners facilitated by Qatar, Egypt, and the USA on the universal conscience and deeply questions our humanity. The stronghold of increased, stifling, dehumanized globalization does not leave Africa outside the hegemonic struggles that are taking place far from its land. On the contrary, the continent is suffering from the excesses and fragmentations reflected in proximity conflicts, barely veiled support from external powers from the warring parties on the continent, the expansion of terrorism and violent extremism, the continuation of a devastating war in the Sudan, in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, the divisions of Libya, whose reconciliation charter was signed and adopted yesterday, and I would like to congratulate you, President Sassou Nguesso. Tensions of all kinds in the Sahel, in the Lake Chad Basin, in the Gulf of Guinea, in Mozambique, in the Horn of Africa and the Great Lakes region are another part of the unsmoldering string of African crises. The flow of political, economic, environmental refugees and other internally displaced persons is exacerbating the already fragile security, food, and health situation in many member states. It is this seriously degraded global and regional context that we have been facing over the past 8 years of the development of our action. Excellency, Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, the institutional reform of our Union, which began in 2017, aimed at establishing the optimal condition to guarantee the efficient pursuit of the programs included in our strategic doctrinal guiding compass Agenda 2063 for the purpose of better resistance to the challenges that were identified. In this regard, the reconfiguration of the leadership, a staff performance evaluation process, closer cooperative relationship between the African Union and the regional economic communities and the regional mechanisms enacted by a new protocol, the institutionalization of a coordination summit dedicated to integration, the establishment of the technical groups R10 and N15, responsible to ensuring the quality of human resources recruited and compliance with the golden rules of budgetary, financial, and accounting management principles of the African Union have been the salient features of this reform. And but is without any complacency, we'll have a new institutional map of the Union. I'm here stressing three of these organs: the Pan-African Parliament, the Peace and Security Council, and the Permanent Representatives Committee. The overall movement of the reform, with its shadows and lights, confirms its relevance and its necessary progressive nature to be deployed over the long term. It is a requirement for the perpetual adaptation of the structures of our Union to the developments that characterize the world. I would like to thank President Paul Kagame and President William Ruto for their remarkable efforts to move this reform forward. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, an assessment of the first 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063, covering the period 2014 to 2023, reveals the sectoral progress made in our march towards building the Africa that we want. It is crucial to learn the real lesson and make the appropriate subsequent adjustments. In the field of health, it is a holistic approach translated on the ground into actions crowned with success. With the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, Africa CDC established itself as the most effective instrument in the fight of all diseases. The worrying issue of health financing continues to be a source of concern for us. Two mechanisms for financing universal health coverage and combating malnutrition on the continent have been designed. Thanks to the African Veterinary Vaccine Center, PANVAC, whose new vaccine production laboratory was inaugurated in February 2024, significant progress has been made in the areas of livestock, animal health, and socio-economic development. The African Medicines Agency, AMA, has begun setting up its headquarters in Kigali and its activities on the launching pad. The traditional medicine has benefited from the development of two 10-year plans of action, the last one running from 2025 to 2035. The field of education has been driven by the desire to design a new educational system according to the requirements of a world where the major challenge has now become competition around scientific and technological innovation, and now by artificial intelligence. It is in line with this spirit that diverse and complementary strategies have been developed, notably during the Nouakchott conference in 2024, initiated by the current chairman, Mauritania, in cooperation with the African Union Commission and other partners, including UNICEF and UNESCO in particular. The centrality of gender and youth issues have been affirmed. The special envoys for women and youth have established themselves well in the institutional universe of the leadership of the organization. Throughout the 8 years of these 2 terms, many other crucial areas engaged the attention they deserved due to their importance for the socio-economic development of Africa. Whether it is our vision on mining issues, the comprehensive agriculture program and the blue economy, the development of infrastructure and energy, climate change with adaptation and climate resilience of the continent, regional integration through the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the effective operationalization of the Peace Fund, which has exceeded the set target of $400 million, the treatment of humanitarian crisis of which Africa is the epicenter, with the establishment of the African Humanitarian Agency, the strengthening of the visibility of the African Union through our partnership with the United Nations, all have been at the center of our collective endeavor. I would like to seize this opportunity to pay special tribute to a major architect of this partnership. I'm here referring to Antonio Guterres, a great friend of Africa. Thank you, Antonio. The membership of the African Union, the G20, and the BRICS, of which several African countries are members, have crowned this visibility. On all these issues, the specialized structure of the African Union and the member states have carried out in-depth discussions and outlined clear prospects for some and given concrete form to many others. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a few months ago I sent to Your Excellencies a letter relating to some urgent issues at the heart of the future of our Union and its capacity to attain as best as possible our objectives. I'm here thinking first of the Peace and Security Council, which I mentioned earlier on, and its role should be carried out on the basis of texts that govern its function, its operation, from which it draws the strength and legitimacy to design, supervise the pressing issues of our collective security, and impose, if necessary, the required sanctions. It is very regrettable that its decisions are sometimes contrary to our own principles, and when they are not, often remain dead letters. The decision of this central continental organ cannot be considered in a casual manner, nor by bias the concept and practice of its regional economic communities in the name of the hackneyed principle of subsidiarity interpreted in a self-interest and partisan manner. The mentioning of the PSC brings forth the issue of unconstitutional changes of government. In this regard, I mention in the said letter that we have only 2 options henceforth: either abandon the principles that currently govern this issue or apply them seriously. Notwithstanding the fact that we can revise them, adapt them to the new realities, I think for our own credibility, we should continue to establish these principles like a litany while trampling on them and accepting their flagrant and constant violation. There is nothing that eats more into our credibility than such an attitude, which has recently led to a real distrust in the rules and principles and weakened the integration in part of the continent. I'm here mentioning the persistent and paralyzing slump of our unbearable division in terms of representation in relation to our so-called strategic partnerships. I drew attention, and I draw again attention here, to choose one of the 2 options that are presented to us and which I presented in clear terms in my letter. I had also mentioned the recurring issue of the financing of our organization, which paradoxically contrasts with the continuing trends of multiplication of organs without any concern for how to finance them. An independent organization and guardian of our freedom and sovereignty cannot be built with the finances and resources by others. I had also raised the depriving reduction of the initiatives of the chairperson of the African Union Commission and called for its harmonization with the legal and customary obligations that are now imposed on him. In short, the sense of my correspondence is very simple and maybe brutal. It is the question of placing our organization worthily or not before a terrible combination of factors of complexity. These are all the problems that you are facing today that I wanted to raise very modestly in my letter. Are we finally going to open our eyes to the fate of our organization, or are we continue to let it lament and moan? Excellency, Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a commonplace truth today to affirm that the concepts and legal instruments serving as a framework of analyzing the dynamics of contemporary international politics are outdated. They have lost their both structuring and explanatory virtue of current global phenomena. Such an observation explains why the debates today focus on the modalities for the advent of a new global economic and political governance. Africa cannot remain silent and inactivities. It must imperatively throw itself into the battle to carve out its own place in the configuration currently being designed. It is not easy. It will require ingenuity, creativity, method, and courage. More generally, this will require real redemption for an awakening of the consciousness and conscience of the soul of Pan-Africanism, that of our awareness of our Africanity, that of the pride of our Africanity, that of the commitment to our Africanity, that of the rejection of our depersonalization and our nihilistic servility of our identity and our being. This is what African youth are calling for us to do. They are the majority in all our states and are becoming increasingly demanding. Their voices are resonating louder and louder thanks to the new forms of communication that amplify all expressions. African youth are constantly challenging us and putting us on trial for being out of step with their aspirations, which are that of an Africa that is open to itself, united, sovereign in its policies and choices, standing and interdependent. This solidarity has always been our lifeline in the fight against colonialism and apartheid and the completion of our independence. We have just paid tribute to the memory of a great combatant, Sam Nujoma. This should bring something and click something in our minds. Our solidarity should galvanize our consciences, our wills, and our intelligence to lead us to a more promising common destiny. There are no other new path for our future than to listen and to give substance to the aspirations of our youth, our fellow citizens, and our diaspora. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am leaving my office definitively in a few days. I confess that I feel overwhelmed by a sweet feeling of freedom that allows me to say a few words from the bottom of my heart. The first is a word of deep gratitude to your Excellencies for the trust that you have placed in me by electing me for 2 successive terms as the chairperson of the African Union Commission. You must rest assured that I have measured and I continue to measure all the dimensions of this trust and the heavy weight of subsequent gratitude and acknowledgement. The second word concerns the other one and me. In the other one, I'm thinking of our partners, especially those who have offered a sincere friendship and mutually beneficial cooperation. I want to thank them all and express our gratitude. I am also thinking of you present here, those who have left us also for different reasons, you have realized good and great things, and above all, as far as possible, respected a certain ethic and a line of conduct that we have believed to be consistent with our principles. Please accept my full gratitude. The members of the African Union Commission are the men and women that have worked very often in the shadows with diligence, dedication, discipline, and talent. I would like to pay tribute to them, the tribute that they deserve. The third word relates to my own limitations. I wanted so much to do quickly and better during the 2 terms that you entrusted to me. I know that I have not done everything. Perhaps I underestimated the burden of the task and the weight of the constraints. I know that I may have made mistakes. I should not say perhaps, but I should say certainly I've made mistakes. Maybe here and there I have weakened and made mistakes and missed opportunities to do better. I would like to apologize and ask forgiveness if my shortcomings have caused any individual or collective harm. The fourth word relates to my feelings at the moment. I am happy to regain my freedom, but I know that we'll also have the nostalgia of the places, the women and men whom I have known, for the Ethiopian people, with their age-old civilization. To you, my brother, dear brother Abiy Ahmed, Amasaganalo. Maybe we'll have time to write the history of all this tangle of feelings and sensations. Finally, my fifth word is that of my oath to continue to think of Africa, to serve Africa, to dream for its youth for whom we have not done enough and for whom we must do a lot, because after all, it is they who count today and more so tomorrow. A final word to you, Mr. President, Chairperson, and Mr. President, dear brother Sheikh Al-Ghazwani, to tell you how much I appreciated your close relation throughout your mandate. You have been a master of wisdom, civic-mindedness, and loftiness, inspiring in all respects. To you, Mr. President, and dear brother Joao Lorenzo, and I would like to stress that the quiet strength that you symbolize reassures me about a chairmanship of seriousness and substance. May you both in particular, and all of us, have an active thought for the great prisoner of the Sahel, President Mohamed Bazoum, whose interminable detention is not justified. He must be released unconditionally. I wish full success to our summit. I wish full success to our next leadership. I thank you.